Hello, everyone. Yesterday we began the study of the laws of Muktzeh. We gave the basis for the prohibition, which is either to create a fence so that we don't do something on Shabbat that we're not allowed to do, like there's other fences in Judaism, or because it is not the spirit of Shabbat, like we learned in the previous chapter, in chapter 22. So now we are going to learn a little bit of the principles. As a rule, the sages forbade moving things on Shabbat that are not fitting for use on Shabbat and that one puts out of his mind. There are several types of muktzeh. First one is muktzeh mechamat gufo, inherently muktzeh, which means items that are not fitting for any use on Shabbat, such as rocks, trees, sand, animals, and inedible foods. So, like if I have a raw potato, and most people do not eat raw potatoes, then that is muktzeh on Shabbat because there's no way that I can make use of it on Shabbat. So that's why it's muktzeh midato, literally put out of our mind. Second one is called muktzeh mechamat chesron kis, muktzeh because of monetary loss, valuable objects that one takes care not to handle except for their sole designated purpose, out of concern that they will be ruined. Since they have no use on Shabbat, one puts them out of his mind, and so it will be in Halacha 4, but we gave an example yesterday of a knife that is used for circumcision or for slaughtering. It is because it's so sharp, we don't use it for cutting salad or anything like that, even though we're allowed to cut salad. But because this is there will be a great loss, we'll have to take it to an official sharpener, and there's other things that are like that. Number three is basis davar asur, a base for something that is a forbidden object, refers to a case where one places a muktzeh item on an object that is not in itself muktzeh. Since he intends for it to remain there on Shabbat, he puts the base also out of his mind as well, and it too becomes muktzeh. And we're going to learn that there's also what's called basis davar asur v'mutar, meaning something that is a basis. Let's say you put on a book, a pen, and another smaller book, then that is the combination of right now this other book, the larger one, is a base for both something that is forbidden and allowed. Number four, kelim shemalacham leisur, implements or tools whose usage is forbidden, have a special status since they are designated to perform forbidden activities. One puts them out of his mind. On the other hand, sometimes they are used for permitted purposes, therefore one may not move them for their own sake, mechamat gufo, but one may move them to use them permissibly, letzorach gufam, or because one needs the space they occupied, letzorach mekomo. Like we talked about, if somebody has something that is muktzeh on a Shabbos table, and that's not its appropriate place, then we are allowed to completely move it without even using a shinui. But an example to what's called kelim shemachlam isur, a hammer is usually used for putting nails in the wall, which is part of boneh. It's a todah of boneh, of building. And so we are not allowed to obviously do any such activity on Shabbat. But if you have very hard walnut or a coconut that needs to be broken, then you are allowed to use that very same hammer for the purpose of doing the permissible melacha with it. It's not called a melacha, just work or doing something. If a muktzeh item is painfully unpleasant, like a chamber pot, graf shel re'i, so in the old days when they didn't have running water in the houses, they had toilets or potty, poo potty for a child. The sages permitted removing it, even though it's muktzeh mechamat gufo, but because it's unpleasant, and especially on Shabbat, it is allowed to be moved. Prohibition is to move a muktzeh object manually, but one may touch a muktzeh item without moving it. Therefore, one may spread a cover over a computer, telephone, or other muktzeh items on Shabbat. There are some people who have a special cover for it. So if you didn't have time on Friday or you forgot, you're still allowed to do it as long as you don't move it deliberately. One may also move muktzeh from the side, min hatzad. For example, if one needs to pick up an object or food, and in so doing, a muktzeh item that is next to the object or food will be moved indirectly, as long as he does not touch the muktzeh item with his hands. it is not prohibited. However, if the Muktzeh item needs to be moved for its own protection, one may not move it even minatzad, as long as he is using his hands, even if they have no direct contact with the Muktzeh item. So the example he brings is a pretty simple one. For example, if he is using a broom, it is prohibited. However, one may, where the ground is actually ground dirt and not floored. However, one may use any other part of the body. For example, one may move an object that is muktzeh using his foot or elbow. Um, Sometimes it is unclear whether or not a particular item is muktzeh because we lack facts about the situation. For example, if one found fruit under a tree and it is uncertain whether they fell before Shabbat and are permitted or on Shabbat and are muktzeh, we are stringent and consider it muktzeh. And when I mentioned the eggs yesterday that were laid on Shabbat, this was the other example that is mentioned in the Gemara in Beitza, and it's actually the opinion of Rabbah that it is doraisa, that it is muktzeh doraisa, because from biblical source, because we are not allowed to eat something that was that fell on Shabbat. After Shabbat, we are allowed to eat it. So on Shabbat, we aren't even allowed to move it to a safer place to keep it from bugs or anything like that, because it is completely muktzeh. In contrast, if there is a halachic disagreement about whether an item is muktzeh or not, the law follows the lenient position because we have a general rule in halacha, which is safek d'Rabbanan l'kula, that if something is doubtful, but we know for sure that it is a rabbinic prohibition and not a biblical one, we are more lenient. But if something is a biblical, either prohibition or obligation, we are more stringent about. So just for example, if we had to for the positive commandment of eating matzah on Pesach, we are more stringent about what the size of an olive is. But if we don't remember if we ate an ounce of I think it's a liquid ounce or so, I don't remember. If we eat an ounce of a certain food, we don't say bracha achorona because we have a safek, a question, a doubt whether or not we ate something that was the proper amount of kazait. Rabbi Hertzfeld gave an amazing class last week about how we learn the different measurements from the 7 species that are special for Eretz Israel. But that's just a good example where the blessings, except for Birkat Hamazon, are rabbinical. So if I don't know if I ate a kazait, then I don't say the bracha achorona because then I will be saying Hashem's name in vain. So that I think that's a good example. So because this Shabbat is Parashat Re'eh, and I wanted to bring something to your attention. So if you asked most Christians today, what is abomination? I think you know the answer. It has to do with certain relationships, but the word to'eva in the Torah, abomination, is mentioned so many times. You're not allowed to even withhold your workers' pay, and that's called a to'eva. You're not allowed to do all kinds of other things. So in our parsha, the it actually gives a very interesting outlook about to'eva. So we said that the definition of muktzeh is setting something aside, putting it out of my mind, meaning there's not a chance that if I offered somebody who's a good Jew a piece of pig, that they will eat it. They look at it as if, that's not even food. I can't have it. And so it's muktzeh from the word of, like what we said yesterday, that they felt, this is completely wrong. We don't want to have anything to do with these people or with this nation. And so when the Torah says, Lo tochal kol to'eva, do not eat anything that is abhorrent or abomination, and then they give us the list of all the things that we are allowed to eat. And so the rabbis understood from this introduction that everything else that's not on the list is the abomination that Hashem is talking about. It would have taken houses of books to describe every single kind of species of animal, fish, bird, and insect in the world. All insects are forbidden except for the grasshoppers, and even them, there's only four kinds that are specifically mentioned in the Torah. And the Yemenite Jews do eat certain locusts, etc., but we don't know, we don't have a tradition about that. I just wanted to say that we shouldn't right away jump to conclusions what is abomination and what isn't, but we should try to learn the Torah and to understand that some things are just natural for us to set them out of our mind and to say, just like I don't want to eat that animal, I also don't want to touch or do things on Shabbat, which are included in this chapter, and we'll learn more and more next week and the following week after that. So stop here and open up for questions.